The library's fluorescent lights buzz overhead as Amara hunkers down in her usual corner booth, laptop balanced precariously on the worn wooden table. It's 11:47 p.m., and her Victorian literature essay on romantic idealism in Bronte's works is due at midnight. Her fingers fly across the keyboard, fueled by 3 cups of coffee and pure desperation. Professor Miles Harrington doesn't accept late assignments, a policy she's tested exactly 0 times in the 2 semesters she's been hopelessly, pathetically infatuated with him. Focus, Amara. Eyes on the prize, she whispered to herself. But that's the problem, isn't it? Her eyes are always on the prize, and the prize happens to be 6 feet of perfectly sculpted American academia with wavy brown hair that catches the lecture hall lights just right, and those impossibly striking blue-green eyes that seem to see straight through to your soul when he's discussing Heathcliff's tortured love for Catherine. She shakes her head violently, forcing herself back to the essay as the cursor blinks impatiently. A yawn splits her face. She's exhausted. Maybe she should just finish this in the morning and take the late penalty. But no, this is Professor Harrington's class. She's never disappointed him, and she's not starting now. She minimizes her essay document to check the time. 5:52 p.m., 8 minutes left. That's when she saw it. The document tab she forgot she had open. Diary, March 15th. The entry she'd been working on earlier today, trying to process her feelings about what happened in class this afternoon. The memory floods back, and her cheeks burn with embarrassment even though she's alone. Professor Harrington had asked her to stay after class to discuss her midterm paper. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. But when she'd approached his desk, he'd looked up from grading with those ocean-deep eyes and said, "Miss Daniels, your analysis of Rochester's character development was extraordinary. You have a gift for understanding the complexities of human emotion." The way he'd said it, the slight pause, the way his gaze had lingered on hers for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. It had sent electricity shooting through every nerve ending in her body. She'd mumbled something completely incoherent and practically sprinted from the room. She clicked on the diary tab without thinking, just needing to see those words again. The ones she'd poured out in a stream of consciousness when she got back to her dorm. March 15th. I can't stop thinking about what happened today. The way Professor Harrington looked at me when he said I understood the complexities of human emotion. God, if he only knew the complexity of what I'm feeling right now. It's been 2 semesters of sitting in the 3rd row center seat, watching him pace across the front of the classroom like he owns not just the room but the entire concept of literature itself. He's brilliant in a way that makes my chest ache. When he talks about Darcy's pride or Heathcliff's obsession, his whole face lights up, and I find myself wondering what it would feel like to be the subject of that kind of passionate attention. To have Miles Harrington look at me the way Rochester looks at Jane, like I'm the missing piece of his soul. I know it's wrong. I know he's my professor, and I'm just another student with a ridiculous crush. But today, for just a moment, I could have sworn there was something in his eyes. Something that said maybe, just maybe, he sees me as more than just another paper to grade. What would I even say if I had the courage? "Professor, I think about you when I should be sleeping. I memorize the way you gesture when you're explaining symbolism. I've read every single one of your published papers, not for class, but because I want to understand how your mind works. Pathetic, absolutely pathetic, but I can't help it. I'm falling in love with Miles Harrington, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it." 11:54 p.m. She needs to send this essay now. She frantically switches back to her essay tab, copies the entire document, and pastes it into a new email. Her cursor hovers over the send button. 6 minutes. She should proofread this one more time, but there's no time. She hits send and immediately closes her laptop with a satisfied sigh. Done. Crisis averted. She's halfway to her dorm when her phone buzzes. Email notification. Thank you for your submission. However, I believe there may have been an error with your attachment. Please resend at your earliest convenience. Professor Harrington. Attachment? She didn't send an attachment. She sent the essay in the body of the email. Oh no, oh no, 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 no. Her hands shake as she fumbles with her laptop, nearly dropping it twice before she can get it open. She navigates to her sent folder with the frantic desperation of someone defusing a bomb. There it is, the email she sent to Professor Harrington at 11:54 p.m. Subject, Victorian Literature Essay, Amara Daniels. Body, March 15th. I can't stop thinking about what happened today. The way Professor Harrington looked at me when he said I understood the complexities of human emotion. God, if he only knew the complexity of what I'm feeling right now. Every word of her diary entry. Every humiliating, unprofessional, completely inappropriate confession of her feelings for her professor. Sent directly to him, with a subject line that made it look like her official assignment. She's going to be sick. Amara couldn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closes her eyes, she sees Professor Harrington reading her diary entry, his face shifting from confusion to disgust to what? Pity? Amusement? Would he report her to the administration? Would she be kicked out of his class? Out of school entirely? By 6 a.m., she's crafted and deleted 17 different emails trying to explain what happened. Each one sounds more pathetic than the last. Dear Professor Harrington, I'm writing to clarify that my previous email was sent in error. Delete. Professor Harrington, I want to apologize for the inappropriate content. Delete. Hi, Professor. Please pretend you never saw that email. Definitely delete. She finally settles on something short and professional. Professor Harrington, I sincerely apologize for the error in my previous email. Please find my actual assignment attached. I understand if you need to report this incident to the administration. Amara Daniels. She attaches her real essay and sends it before she can lose her nerve. His response comes back within an hour. Miss Daniels, please see me during my office hours today at 2 p.m. We need to discuss this matter privately. Emsal. Harrington. She spends the next 8 hours in a state of pure panic. She skips her morning classes, which she never does. She can't eat. She can't focus on anything except the growing certainty that her academic career is over. At 1:45 p.m., she's standing outside Professor Harrington's office, staring at the nameplate on his door like it might suddenly change to someone else's name. Someone she hasn't just confessed her deepest romantic feelings to in the most mortifying way possible. She raises her hand to knock, then lets it fall, raises it again, let it fall. Miss Daniels? She spins around, and there he is. Professor Harrington stands at the end of the hallway, holding a coffee cup and looking at her with an expression she can't quite read. He's wearing a navy blue sweater that brings out his eyes, and his hair is slightly mussed like he's been running his hands through it. She gestures helplessly at his door. Of course. Please come in. His voice is gentle, which somehow makes everything worse. She'd rather he be angry. Anger she could handle. This careful kindness feels like pity. His office is exactly what she'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a worn leather chair behind an antique wooden desk, and the faint scent of coffee and old books. There's a small reading nook by the window with 2 chairs facing each other. He gestures to one of the chairs. Please sit. Can I get you some water? You look like I want to disappear into the floor. A small smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. I was going to say pale. She sinks into the chair and immediately regrets it. The intimate seating arrangement makes this feel less like a disciplinary meeting and more like she doesn't know what. But it's making her heart race for the wrong reasons. Professor Harrington settles into the chair across from her, setting his coffee cup aside. For a long moment, they just look at each other. The silence stretches until she can't bear it anymore. I'm sorry, she blurts out. I'm so incredibly sorry. I was working on my essay late and I had my diary open on my computer and I was exhausted and I copied the wrong text. I never meant for you to read that, ever. I understand if you need to report me, or if you want me to drop your class, or... Amara. Her name in his voice stops her mid-ramble. Take a breath. She does, trying to ignore the way her name sounds different when he says it. Softer somehow. I want you to know that I'm not going to report this to anyone, he says. What happened was clearly an accident, and the content of your diary entry, while unexpected, wasn't threatening or inappropriate in a way that would require administrative involvement. Relief floods through her so intensely that she feels dizzy. Thank you. God, thank you. I was so scared that However, he continues, and her relief evaporates instantly. We do need to address what you wrote. Heat floods her cheeks. Professor Harrington, please, we don't have to talk about it. I'll just pretend it never happened, and you can pretend you never read it, and we can go back to normal, and... Can we? His voice is quieter now, and when she finally works up the courage to look at him, his expression has changed. The careful professional mask has slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. Can we really pretend, Amira? The way he says her name again makes her breath catch. There's something different about it this time, something that makes her heart forget how to beat properly. I don't understand, she whispers. He leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. What you wrote. About wondering if there was something in my eyes when I spoke to you yesterday. About thinking you saw something that suggested I might see you as more than just another student. Oh God, he's going to tell her how wrong she was, how unprofessional it was for her to even think. You weren't wrong. The words hang in the air between them like a confession. She stares at him, certain she misheard. What? His striking blue-green eyes meet hers, and suddenly she can't breathe. You weren't wrong, Amira. There was something in my eyes yesterday. There's been something in my eyes every time I look at you for the past 2 semesters. Amira must be hallucinating. That's the only rational explanation for what she thinks she just heard Professor Miles Harrington say to her. I think I misunderstood. You didn't. He runs a hand through his hair, messing it up even more. God, Amira, I've been trying so hard to maintain professional boundaries, to ignore what I was feeling, but reading your words last night, seeing my own thoughts reflecting back at me. He stands up abruptly and moves to the window, his back to her. The late afternoon sunlight creates a halo effect around his silhouette, and she has to remind herself to breathe. This is insane, he says to the window. I'm your professor. You're my student. There are rules, protocols, ethical guidelines. Professor Harrington, he turns around, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly undoes her. Amira, I need you to understand something, what I just admitted to you. It can't go anywhere. It can't become anything. The words hit her like cold water. What do you mean? I mean that regardless of what we both might be feeling, you're 22 years old. You're at the beginning of your academic career, figuring out who you are and what you want from life. I won't be responsible for influencing those decisions. You're not influencing anything, aren't I? He moves back to his desk, putting distance between them. Amira, you're brilliant and talented, and you have your whole future ahead of you. I'm 31 years old. I'm your professor. There's an inherent power imbalance here that makes any kind of relationship between us ethically problematic. She feels like he's slipping away from her even as they're talking. So what was the point of telling me how you feel? Because you deserve to know that your feelings weren't one-sided. Because reading your diary entry made me realize how unfair it was to let you think you were imagining things. He sits heavily in his chair, but knowing that we both feel something doesn't change the reality of our situation. And what reality is that? That I could lose my job, that you could face academic consequences. That even if we waited until you graduated, people would always question whether your grades, your recommendations, your opportunities were earned or given. The logic is sound, but it feels like he's building a wall between them brick by brick. So we just ignore this, pretend this conversation never happened. We be professional. We maintain appropriate boundaries, and maybe when you graduate, when you're established in your own career, when there's no question of impropriety. He trails off, looking as miserable as she feels. Maybe what? Maybe we'll see where we both are in life. She stares at him across the desk that suddenly feels like an ocean between them. You're asking me to wait 2 years. I'm asking you to live your life, date people your own age. Figure out what you want your career to look like. Don't put your future on hold for something that might not even be real once you're out in the world. It feels pretty real to me right now. I know. His voice is barely above a whisper. It feels real to me too. But Amira, I've seen too many students make decisions based on infatuation with their professors, only to regret them later. I won't let that happen to you. The dismissal stings more than she expected. So you think this is just infatuation? I think you're young and brilliant, and you've mistaken intellectual compatibility for something deeper. And what do you think it is for you? He's quiet for so long she doesn't think he's going to answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is raw with honesty. I think it's the most real thing I've felt in years, which is exactly why I can't act on it. They sit in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. What happens now? She finally asks. Now we go back to being professor and student. I continue to mentor your academic development because you deserve that support. You continue to excel in your studies because you're capable of extraordinary things. He straightens in his chair, and she can see him rebuilding his professional composure. And we both pretend this conversation never happened. Can you do that? I have to. And if I can't? Then you'll need to transfer to another section, maybe another professor entirely. The words clearly pain him to say. I understand if that's what you need to do. She gathers her things slowly, her mind reeling. At the door, she turns back. Professor Harrington? Yes? For what it's worth, I don't think what I'm feeling is infatuation. And I don't think 2 years is going to change that. She leaves before he can respond, but she sees the pain in his eyes as she closes the door. The next few weeks are torture. Miles keeps his word about maintaining professional boundaries, but the awareness between them is electric. Every time he hands back a paper, every time their eyes meet during class, every time he stays a careful distance away during office hours. It all serves as a reminder of what they've acknowledged but can't pursue. Amara throws herself into her studies with renewed intensity, partly to prove to herself that her feelings are more than just infatuation, and partly to distract from the constant ache of wanting something she can't have. Miles, for his part, is scrupulously professional, almost cold sometimes. She catches him watching her during lectures with an expression she can't read, but he never lets his guard down again. 3 weeks after their conversation, Dean Patterson called Amara and Miles into her office. Miss Daniels, Dean Patterson says, settling into the chair across from Miles. Amara notices that Miles looks as surprised as she feels about this impromptu meeting. I've been reviewing student evaluations and academic records, and your performance in Professor Harrington's classes has been exemplary. Top of your class both semesters. Thank you, Amara manages, which is why I'm here. She pulls out a folder and opens it. The university has received a generous grant to fund a graduate student research position, working directly with Professor Harrington on his upcoming book about romantic literature. The position would begin this summer and continue through next year. Amara can feel Miles's eyes on her, but she doesn't dare look at him. The salary is substantial, Dean Patterson continues. Full tuition waiver plus living expenses. It's an incredible opportunity for the right student. Professor Harrington specifically recommended you. He did? The words slip out before she can stop them. Several weeks ago, actually. Your academic performance has been consistently outstanding. Thank you. Dean Patterson closes the folder and looks between Miles and Amara with a serious expression. However, I need to address something important with both of you. This type of close working relationship, mentor and student spending extensive time together on research, can sometimes lead to complications. Amira's blood runs cold. Does she suspect something? I've seen it happen before, Dean Patterson continues. Brilliant students and dedicated professors who develop feelings that go beyond the academic realm. It's more common than you might think, and it always ends badly for everyone involved. Miles shifts uncomfortably in his chair. Dean Patterson, I can assure you that Miss Daniels and I maintain strictly professional. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, she interrupts. I'm simply being proactive. Miss Daniels, this research opportunity could be life-changing for your career. The kind of experience that opens doors to the best PhD programs in the country. Professor Harrington, this collaboration could significantly enhance your publication record and tenure prospects. She stands up, smoothing down her skirt. Which is why I need you both to understand that any romantic entanglement would destroy these opportunities. The university has zero tolerance for student-faculty relationships. Zero. Even the appearance of impropriety would result in immediate consequences. The room feels like all the air has been sucked out of it. I'm not saying this to be cruel, Dean Patterson continues, her voice softening slightly. I'm saying it because I've seen too many promising careers destroyed by temporary attractions that seemed important at the time but ultimately weren't worth the cost. She moves toward the door. Think carefully about what you want your futures to look like. Miss Daniels, I'll need your decision about the research position by Friday. After she leaves, Miles and Amara sit in stunned silence for several minutes. Well, he says finally, that settles it. What do you mean? I mean, she's right. This opportunity is too important for your future, and any complication between us would destroy both our careers. He stands up and moves behind his desk, the physical distance emphasizing his emotional withdrawal. You should take the position. Miles, Professor Harrington. He corrects gently but firmly. And you should take the position, Amara. Work with me professionally. Keep things strictly academic, build your career. And us? There is no us. There can't be. His voice is steady, but she can see the pain in his eyes. What we talked about in this office a few weeks ago, we need to forget it ever happened. Can you do that? I have to. She stands up slowly, feeling like something precious has just been taken away from her. What if I don't want the research position? What if I transfer to another university? Then you'd be throwing away an incredible opportunity because of a crush. The word crush stings like a slap. Is that what you think this is? I think it's what it has to be. She gathers her bag and moves toward the door. You know what, Professor Harrington? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is just a crush. Maybe I am too young to know what I want. He flinches at the formality in her voice. Amira, but maybe, she continues, you're a coward who's using my age and university policy as excuses because you're afraid to take a real risk for something that could be extraordinary. She leaves before he can respond, but she sees the truth of her words hit their mark in his expression. 2 days later, she accepts the research position. Working closely with Miles while maintaining professional boundaries proves to be its own special kind of torture. They spend hours side by side in the library's special collections room, analyzing manuscripts and discussing theoretical frameworks. Their intellectual chemistry as undeniable as ever. But Miles is scrupulously careful now. He never sits too close and keeps all conversations strictly academic. The warmth and personal connection that used to characterize their interactions has been replaced by polite professionalism, and it's driving Amira crazy. The Gothic elements in Wuthering Heights serve as more than mere atmospheric devices, she explains, pointing to a passage in her notes. They're manifestations of repressed desires that Victorian society wouldn't allow characters to express directly. Interesting theory, Miles says, making notes on his laptop. Can you cite specific textual evidence? His tone is perfectly professional, perfectly distant, like they're strangers discussing literature instead of two people who've admitted to having feelings for each other. When Heathcliff says he can feel Catherine's presence after her death, she continues, it's not just supernatural romanticism. It's Bronte's way of expressing the kind of passionate, consuming love that couldn't exist within the constraints of Victorian marriage conventions. And how does that connect to our broader thesis about Gothic influence on romantic narratives? She wants to scream. They used to have passionate debates about literature. They used to build on each other's ideas, challenge each other's interpretations, get excited about new discoveries. Now he responds to her insights like he's grading a paper. Miles, she says, frustration finally breaking through her professional barrier. Professor Harrington, he corrects without looking up from his laptop. Professor Harrington, are we going to pretend for the next year that we're strangers? That we don't have any personal connection beyond research? He finally looks at her, and she sees the carefully controlled emotion in his eyes. That's exactly what we're going to do. Because Dean Patterson scared you. Because Dean Patterson was right. He closes his laptop. Amira, this research could make both our careers. Your analysis of Gothic romantic intersections is groundbreaking. My connections in academic publishing could get us featured in the top journals. But only if we maintain absolute professionalism. And if we can't, then we'll have destroyed something potentially extraordinary for something definitely temporary. You think what we feel is temporary? He's quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. I think what we feel is dangerous. 3 weeks into their collaboration, Dr. Elizabeth Thornfield stops by the special collections room during one of their research sessions. Professor Harrington, Miss Daniels, she says with a warm smile. I wanted to check on how the research project is progressing. Very well, Miles says, standing up. Miss Daniels has made some remarkable discoveries about the connection between Gothic horror elements and Victorian romantic themes. Excellent, I'd love to hear more about that, Miss Daniels. Amira explains their findings, and Dr. Thornfield listens with genuine interest, but she notices the older woman's eyes occasionally moving between Miles and her, assessing something she can't quite identify. Fascinating work, Dr. Thornfield says when Amira finishes. You two make an excellent research team. Thank you, they say almost simultaneously, then glance at each other awkwardly. Dr. Thornfield's expression becomes slightly more serious. I wonder if I could speak with you privately for a moment, Miss Daniels. Miles starts to protest, but she holds up a hand. Professor Harrington, perhaps you could give us a few minutes? He looks at Amira with concern, but there's nothing either of them can do. He gathers his papers and leaves, closing the door behind him. Dr. Thornfield waits until his footsteps fade before sitting down across from Amara. Miss Daniels, I'm going to speak frankly with you because I believe you're a smart young woman who can appreciate honest advice. Of course. I've been in academia for 30 years. I've seen brilliant students and dedicated professors work closely together on research projects. Sometimes the intellectual intimacy and shared passion for the work can evolve into something more personal. Amira's heart starts racing, but she keeps her expression neutral. It's actually quite common, Dr. Thornfield continues. Two intelligent people spending long hours together, discovering new ideas, challenging each other intellectually. It creates a bond that can feel very much like romantic attraction. I see. The problem is that such relationships, even when they're genuine, always end in disaster in an academic setting. Always. I've seen promising students expelled, tenured professors fired, brilliant careers destroyed. The university has zero tolerance for faculty-student relationships, even when both parties are adults acting in good faith. She leans forward, her expression becoming almost maternal. Amara, your work with Professor Harrington is exceptional. This research could open doors for you that most graduate students never see. But I need you to be very, very careful not to let personal feelings compromise your professional judgment. Dr. Thornfield, I can assure you that my relationship with Professor Harrington is strictly professional. I hope that's true, and I hope it stays that way. She stands up. Because if it doesn't, you'll be the one who pays the highest price. The student always does. After she leaves, Miles returns to find Amara staring out the window. What did she say? He asks. She warned me about getting too emotionally involved with my research mentor. Did she suspect? No. She said it happens often. Intellectual intimacy leading to personal attraction. She turns to face him. She said it always ends in disaster. Miles is quiet for a long moment. Maybe we should request a different arrangement. I could recommend you to Professor Chen for her Victorian Women Writers project. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. What matters is what's best for your career. And you don't think working with me is best for your career? I think working with me is dangerous for your career. She studies his face, seeing the internal struggle he's trying so hard to hide. Because you don't trust yourself to maintain boundaries? Because I don't trust either of us to maintain boundaries, he admits. And because Dr. Thornfield is right. If anything happens between us, you'll be the one who suffers the most. So we just give up, stop working together? We be smart, we protect your future. What about your future? I'm already established. I have tenure track. I can survive a scandal. You can't. His logic is sound, but it feels like he's pushing her away to protect her from something she's perfectly capable of deciding for herself. Miles, she says quietly, what if I'm willing to take that risk? Then you'd be making a mistake that could follow you for the rest of your career. Before she can respond, his phone buzzes. He glances at it, and his expression changes dramatically. What is it? She asks. My parents. They're coming to visit next weekend. He looks up at her with something like panic in his eyes. And they're bringing Victoria. Victoria, Amara repeats in confusion. Who is that? My supposed fiancé, Miles said after some hesitations as he could read an instant change in her facial expression. We're not engaged, he added quickly. The families have been discussing it, but nothing's been formalized. But they're bringing her to meet you. To continue the courtship process, yes. He runs his hands through his hair, a gesture she's come to recognize as his tell when he's stressed. So what does this mean for us? It means we need to be extra careful. My parents are very traditional, very concerned about appearances. If they sense any impropriety, they'll make it their mission to destroy your career. She feels like she's watching him slip away from her again, just when they were starting to find their footing as research partners. Maybe I should make myself scarce while they're here. Actually, that might make things worse. I believe they must have known about you already, judging by how my mums somehow always know who and what is around me. If you suddenly disappear from the research project, they'll ask questions. He starts pacing around the small room. No, we need to act completely normal. Professional colleagues working on an academic project. But have we not been normal? She scoffed. He stops pacing and looks at her with an expression she can't quite read. Have we? His face was now full of an emotion that wasn't there a few minutes ago. You always look at me like you want to wrap me in your arms and eat me up. So much I can barely maintain any professionalism around you anymore. I love you, Amira, and you know it. Every time we are alone, it takes all of my sanity to be calm. I would love to be with you, to have you in my arms, to be free with my emotions with you, but I can't. You can, Amira almost shouted, tears now streaming from relief of the one she loves, her professor, finally expressing his emotions towards her. You can, Miles. I can? He asked almost like a plea. But Amira is now covering the distance between them and took his lips, kissing him with a passion that has been buried, but burning within. Miles didn't resist, and kissed her back with the same fierceness. When they finally broke apart, both were panting and somewhat peaceful. I'm sorry I've been holding back. Miles spoke first. I guess I've been a coward, not wanting to dare or damn consequences. You're not. You just care too much about what will or will not happen. Amira smiled, obviously happy at the turn of event between them. Miles, I want to do this with you and bear whatever consequences that might be. It's okay, Amira. Let's do this, Miles finally said, but let's do this my way, my pace. The weekend arrives faster than she'd like, as Miles has warned her that his parents want to meet her as his extraordinary student. They had to take things slow before clarifying her relationship to them. He had said it has to be purely in the context of learning about his research, of course, so she spends extra time getting ready, choosing an outfit that strikes the right balance between professional and approachable. She's in the library's special collections room organizing their research materials when she hears voices approaching. Multiple voices, including Miles's. And this is where we conduct most of our research, he's saying as the door opens. Amira, I'd like you to meet my parents. She stands up and turns around to face three people. Miles, a distinguished older man who clearly shares his son's bone structure, and an elegant woman in her late 50s who radiates old money sophistication. But it's the third person who makes her stomach drop. Victoria Ashworth is even more beautiful in person than she'd imagined. Tall, willowy, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of effortless grace that comes from generations of good breeding. She's wearing a designer dress that probably costs more than Amira's semester's tuition, and when she smiles, it's with the confidence of someone who's never doubted her place in the world. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, Amira says, extending her hand with what she hopes is appropriate professional warmth. It's a pleasure to meet you. Miles has told me so much about your family. Miss Daniels, Mr. Harrington says, shaking her hand with a firm grip. Miles speaks very highly of your research abilities. Thank you, sir. Working with Professor Harrington has been an incredible learning experience. Mrs. Harrington studies her with sharp blue eyes, the same shade as Miles's, but colder. How lovely. And this is Victoria Ashworth, a dear family friend. Victoria steps forward with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Miss Daniels, what an interesting project you're working on. Miles was just telling us about Gothic influences on Victorian romance. How academic. The dismissive tone is subtle, but unmistakable. Amira glances at Miles, who looks like he wants to be anywhere else in the world. It's fascinating work, she says carefully. The way authors like the Brontes used supernatural elements to explore themes of passion and desire that couldn't be expressed directly in their social context. Oh, how thrilling, Victoria says with the kind of bright enthusiasm people use when they're trying to be polite about something they find boring. Miles, darling, you never told me your research was so intense. The casual darling hits Amira like a physical blow. Victoria is marking her territory, and they all know it. Would you like to see some of the manuscripts we're working with? Miles asks, clearly desperate to redirect the conversation to safer ground. That would be wonderful, Mrs. Harrington says, but her eyes never leave Amira's face. Miss Daniels, how long have you been working with my son? About a month now, ma'am. Since the beginning of the summer research program. And before that? Were you one of his students? There's something in her tone that makes Amira cautious. Yes, ma'am, I took his Victorian literature courses last year. How nice. And your family? Are they in academics as well? She's being interviewed, Amira realizes, evaluated as a potential threat to their carefully laid plans for Miles's future. My father is an engineer, my mother is a high school English teacher. They're both very supportive of my academic goals. How lovely, Mrs. Harrington says in a tone that suggests it's anything but. Public school, I assume? Margaret, Mr. Harrington says quietly, a gentle warning. But Victoria jumps in smoothly. There's nothing wrong with public education, Mrs. Harrington. I'm sure Miss Daniels received an excellent foundation for her studies here. The condescension is wrapped in a pretty bow, but it's condescension nonetheless. Amara feels her temper starting to rise, but Miles catches her eye and gives an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Miss Daniels is one of the most gifted students I've had the privilege to work with, he says firmly. Her insights into literary analysis are truly exceptional. I'm sure they are, Victoria says with another bright smile. It must be so rewarding to mentor young minds, Miles, like having a brilliant little sister to guide. The little sister comment is the last straw. Amara sees red for a moment, but before she can say something she'll regret, Dr. Thornfield appears in the doorway. Professor Harrington, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Miles says, relief evident in his voice. Dr. Thornfield, I'd like you to meet my parents, James and Margaret Harrington, and family friend Victoria Ashworth. Dr. Thornfield greets everyone with professional warmth, then turns to Amara. Miss Daniels, I was hoping to speak with you about your conference proposal. Do you have a moment? It's clearly a rescue mission, and Amara is grateful for it. Of course. As they leave the room, she hears Mrs. Harrington saying to Miles, she seems very earnest. Rather intense for such a young woman. Dr. Thornfield doesn't speak until they're well out of earshot. Difficult afternoon? You could say that. The blonde one is quite lovely. Yes, she is. And quite territorial. Amara looks at her in surprise. You noticed that too? My dear, I've been navigating academic politics for 3 decades. I can spot a power play from across campus. She stops walking and turns to face Amara. I hope you're being very careful. What do you mean? I mean that family has the kind of money and connections that could make your life very difficult if they perceive you as a threat to their plans. The warning sends a chill down Amara's spine. Dr. Thornfield, I'm not a threat to anyone's plans. I'm just trying to do good research. I know that, but perception matters more than reality in situations like this. She places a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. Just be careful, and if you need anything, my door is always open. When Amara returns to the special collections room an hour later, the Harrington family and Victoria are gone. Miles is sitting alone, staring blankly at his laptop screen. How did the rest of the visit go? She asks. About as well as you'd expect. He looks up at her with exhausted eyes. Victoria made it very clear that she thinks academic research is a fine hobby, but not appropriate as a long-term career focus. And your parents? Think you're a lovely girl who's clearly infatuated with her professor. The words hit like ice water. They said that? Not in so many words, but my mother has a particular talent for character assessment. He closes his laptop with more force than necessary. She also thinks I'm being indulgent by working so closely with a young female student. Maybe they're right. Maybe we should... No. His voice is firm, almost angry. Amara, I finally have you, and I'm not letting you go. What we're doing here is an important and legitimate research. I won't let my family's prejudices undermine that, even if it makes things complicated for you personally. He looks at her for a long moment, and she sees something shift in his expression. Especially then. It's the second crack she's seen in his professional armor in weeks, and it gives her hope that maybe, just maybe, they can find a way through this maze of complications together. But that night, she gets a text message from an unknown number. Stay away from Miles. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. A friend. She stares at the message for a long time, her hands shaking slightly. Because she's starting to realize that Dr. Thornfield was right. This isn't just about university policy or professional boundaries anymore. This is about people with power who will do whatever it takes to protect their vision of Miles's future. And she's standing directly in their way. The anonymous text message is just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, strange things start happening to Amara. Her research materials are moved when she's sure she left them in specific places. Her laptop crashes twice, losing hours of work. She receives several more anonymous messages, each one more threatening than the last. You're making a mistake that will ruin both your lives. Some people don't know their place. Don't be one of them. Professor Harrington deserves better than a desperate student's infatuation. She doesn't tell Miles about the messages at first. They're finally finding their rhythm as research partners again, and she doesn't want to disrupt the fragile professional relationship they've rebuilt. But when her car gets a flat tire in the university parking lot, a tire that looks suspiciously like it was slashed, she knows she has to say something. "Miles," she says one afternoon as they're packing up their research materials, "I need to tell you about something." She shows him the messages on her phone. His face darkens with each one he reads. "Amira, when did these start?" "The night your family visited, and there's more." She tells him about the moved research materials, the laptop crashes, the slashed tire. Miles runs both hands through his hair, a gesture she now recognizes as his response to extreme stress. "This is my fault. I should have seen this coming." "How is this your fault?" "Because I know my family. I know how they operate when they think their interests are threatened." He starts pacing around the small room. "My mother has a way of making problems disappear quietly and efficiently." "You think your mother is behind this?" "I think my mother is capable of orchestrating harassment campaigns that can't be traced back to her. She has connections, resources, people who owe her favors." He stops pacing and looks at her with genuine fear in his eyes. "Amira, you need to be careful. This could escalate." "Into what?" "Into academic sabotage. False complaints to the administration. Pressure on your funding sources. My family doesn't make idle threats." She sinks into her chair, the full scope of what she's up against starting to hit her. "So what do you suggest? That I drop out of school? Transfer to another university? Give up on everything I've worked for?" "No. This time I will face it," he said decisively. "It's time they know I won't be going along with their arrangement anyway. And then I'm going to make a decision that I should have made weeks ago." He gathers his things quickly, but at the door, he turns back to her. "Amira, yes? Whatever happens tonight, whatever my family says or does or threatens, I need you to know that these last few months of working with you have been the most intellectually and personally fulfilling of my entire academic career. Miles, you're scaring me. What aren't you telling me?" But he's already gone, leaving her alone with the growing certainty that everything is about to change. Miles doesn't show up to the library the next day or the day after that. By the third day, Amira is genuinely worried. She sent several emails asking about the research schedule, all professional and appropriate, but she hasn't received any response. His office hours are canceled. His departmental assistant says he's taking personal time for family matters. On Friday afternoon, she's in the special collections room alone, trying to continue their research project, when she receives an unexpected phone call. "Miss Daniels? This is Mrs. Harrington." "Miles' mother. Her blood runs cold." "Mrs. Harrington, is Miles okay?" "Miles is fine. But we need to talk. Are you available to meet this evening? Where is Miles?" Miles is indisposed at the moment. "Miss Daniels, I'm calling because I believe there's been a misunderstanding about my son's situation. One that needs to be cleared up immediately." Her tone is polite but steel-edged. "This is not a request. I'll meet you," Amira hears herself saying. "Where?" She gives her the address of an upscale hotel downtown. "The Oak Room, 7 o'clock. Come alone." The line goes dead. Amira spends the next 3 hours getting ready and trying not to panic. What does indisposed mean? Why is his mother calling her instead of Miles calling himself? And what kind of misunderstanding requires a face-to-face meeting? The Oak Room is exactly what she expected. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, the kind of place where old money feels comfortable. Mrs. Harrington is sitting at a corner table when she arrives, and she's not alone. Victoria Ashworth sits beside her, looking perfectly composed in a way that makes Amira's skin crawl. "Miss Daniels?" Mrs. Harrington stands as she approaches. She's an elegant woman in her late 50s, with the same striking blue-green eyes as Miles but none of his warmth. "Thank you for coming." Amira sits across from them, trying to project confidence she doesn't feel. "Where is Miles?" "Getting some much-needed perspective," Victoria says sweetly. "He's been under a lot of stress lately. Academic pressure, you understand?" "What does that mean?" Mrs. Harrington signals the waiter for another round of drinks. "Miss Daniels, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe you're an intelligent young woman who can appreciate honesty." "Please do." "My son came home this week in quite a state, talking about ending his academic career, throwing away everything he's worked for." Her eyes narrow, all because of some infatuation with a student. The way she says infatuation makes it sound dirty. "I wouldn't call it an infatuation," Amira says carefully. "Wouldn't you?" Victoria leans forward, her smile sharp. "Miss Daniels, may I ask how old you are?" 22. and Miles is 31. 9 years older, established in his career, from a family with certain expectations. She exchanges a glance with Mrs. Harrington. Tell me, what do you think you could possibly offer him that I cannot? The question is designed to cut, and it does, but it also makes Amara angry. I offer him someone who actually knows who he is, she says evenly. Someone who loves his work, who understands his passion for literature, who doesn't want to change everything about his life to fit some predetermined mold. Mrs. Harrington sets down her drink with a sharp click. Miss Daniels, my son is going through what we might call a midlife crisis. It's not uncommon for men in their 30s to become confused about what they want. He's not confused. He's finally being honest about what makes him happy. And you think that's you? And I understand that professors can seem very sophisticated and worldly to their students. But this little fantasy you've built up about you and Miles, it's just that, a fantasy. Is it? Amara pulls out her phone and shows them the research they've been working on, the emails they've exchanged, the intellectual partnership they've built. Does this look like fantasy to you? Mrs. Harrington barely glances at the screen. Miss Daniels, you seem to be under the impression that shared academic interests constitute a basis for a romantic relationship. They constitute a basis for understanding each other. Understanding. Victoria laughs, a sound like breaking glass. Let me tell you what I understand. I understand that Miles comes from a family with a certain social standing. I understand that he has responsibilities, obligations, a reputation to maintain. I understand that his career depends on the goodwill of people like my father, who funds several programs at his university. The threat is crystal clear. And I understand, Mrs. Harrington continues, that you are a graduate student with your whole future ahead of you. A future that could be very bright indeed if you make smart choices. Or very difficult, Victoria adds, if you make foolish ones. Amara looks between them, these two women who think they can manipulate Miles's life like pieces on a chessboard. Where is he? She asks again. Safe, Mrs. Harrington says, getting the help he needs to think clearly about his responsibilities. What kind of help? Victoria's smile becomes predatory. The Ashworth family has connections with some excellent private facilities, places where people can go to, refocus their priorities, when they're struggling with poor decision-making. The implication hits her like a sledgehammer. You had him committed? Not committed, Mrs. Harrington says quickly, voluntarily admitted for exhaustion and stress-related decision-making issues. Perfectly legal when the family is concerned about someone's mental state. Amara stands up so quickly her chair rocks backward. You can't do that. He's a grown man. A grown man who came home talking about throwing away his career and his family's reputation for a student young enough to be his daughter, Mrs. Harrington snaps, her composure finally cracking. A man who was clearly not thinking rationally. He was thinking more rationally than he ever has in his life. Was he? Victoria stands too, moving closer to Amara. Miss Daniels, let me paint you a picture of what Miles's life looks like if he follows through on this. Impulse. He loses his job when the university discovers his inappropriate relationship with a student. His family cuts him off financially. His reputation in academic circles is destroyed. He ends up teaching at some community college, struggling to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment. She pauses, letting that sink in. Is that really what you want for him? Is your happiness worth destroying his entire life? The words hit their target. Because isn't that what Amara's been worried about all along? That loving her will cost Miles everything he's worked for? On the other hand, Mrs. Harrington continues, if he comes to his senses and honors his commitment to Victoria, his future is secure. Tenure-track position, eventually department head, possibly even dean, the respect of his peers, financial security, a family legacy to be proud of. All he has to do is marry someone he doesn't love. Love. Victoria says the word like it tastes bad. Miss Daniels, love is a luxury. Marriage is a partnership. Miles and I are perfectly suited for each other. Same social background, same values, same goals for the future. You want to throw away his books and change his career. I want to help him reach his full potential instead of staying buried in dusty old libraries forever. Amara stares at her. This woman who thinks she knows what's best for Miles better than he knows himself. What do you want from me? She asks finally. We want you to walk away, Mrs. Harrington says simply. End whatever relationship you think you have with my son. Transfer to another university. Let him get on with his life. And if I don't, then you'll be responsible for destroying a good man's future, Victoria says. And I don't think you want that on your conscience. They leave her sitting alone in the oak room, surrounded by the scent of old leather and older money, with a choice that feels impossible. Walk away from Miles and let him marry a woman who doesn't understand him, or fight for him and risk destroying his career in the process. Either way, someone gets hurt. Either way, she loses. Amara doesn't go home that night. Instead, she sits in her car outside the hotel, making phone calls. First, she calls every psychiatric facility in Connecticut. Most won't give her information, but on her 7th try, she finds a receptionist who recognizes Miles's name. Oh, Professor Harrington? Yes, he's here. But visiting hours are over, and he's only approved for family visits right now. I'm his fiancé, she lies smoothly. The word feels wrong on her tongue, but it gets her the information she needs. Well, I suppose that would be acceptable, but you'll need to bring identification and proof of your relationship. She hangs up and immediately calls her roommate Jessica, waking her up. Jess, I need you to help me forge an engagement announcement. What? Amara, it's midnight. What are you talking about? She explains the situation as quickly as she can. Jessica is studying graphic design and she's brilliant with Photoshop. This is insane, Jessica says when Amara finishes. You're talking about impersonating someone's fiancé to break into a psychiatric facility. I'm talking about rescuing someone who was committed against his will by his controlling family. There's a long pause. How long do I have? 2 hours later, Amara is driving to Connecticut with a fake ID identifying her as Victoria Ashworth and a beautifully crafted engagement announcement from the Connecticut social pages featuring her photo. The facility is a discreet building tucked away in the countryside, the kind of place wealthy families use when they need to. Make problems disappear quietly. She takes a deep breath and walks through the front doors like she owns the place. I'm here to see my fiancé, Miles Harrington, she tells the night receptionist, sliding her fake ID across the desk. She barely glances at it. Room 237. Elevator to the 2nd floor, turn left. Her heart pounds as she walks down the hallway. What if Miles doesn't want to see her? What if his family is right and he really is having some kind of breakdown? What if... She knocks softly on the door to room 237. Come in. Miles is sitting by the window, fully dressed, staring out at the grounds. He turns when she enters, and his face goes through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Surprise, relief, love, concern. Amara, what are you doing here? Getting you out of here. She moves to him quickly, checking him over for any signs of mistreatment. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, just confused about how I ended up here. He takes her hands and she can see the anger burning in his eyes. My mother and Victoria convinced the intake staff that I was having a mental health crisis. Signed some papers claiming I was a danger to myself due to erratic decision-making and delusional thinking. Can they do that? Apparently, if you have enough money and the right connections. He stands up and she can see he's ready to go. The doctor here is actually quite reasonable. He's already determined that there's nothing wrong with me, that a little distance from my family wouldn't cure. But the earliest they can discharge me is Monday. We're not waiting until Monday. Amara, you can't just break me out of here. Watch me. She pulls out her phone and shows him the fake engagement announcement. According to this, I'm Victoria Ashworth. Your grieving fiancé who's here to take you home. He stares at the photo, then at her, then starts laughing. Actually laughing for the first time since this whole mess started. You forged an engagement announcement? My roommate is very talented. You're incredible. He pulls her into his arms, and for a moment the world feels right again. But if we do this, there's no going back. My family will never forgive me. Victoria's family will make good on their threats. I'll lose everything. Not everything. She looks up at him. This man she loves enough to break him out of a psychiatric facility. You'll have me. You'll have your work, your passion, your integrity. You'll have a life that's actually yours. He studies her face for a long moment. And you, what will you have? The same thing. A life that's actually mine. She kisses him softly. Miles, I've spent the last 24 hours thinking about what your mother and Victoria said, about how loving you might destroy your career, your future, your family relationships. And I realized that a future built on lies and compromises isn't worth having. I'd rather have an uncertain future with someone I love than a secure future with someone I don't. Even if it means starting over completely? Especially if it means starting over completely. She smiles at him. Besides, we make a pretty good team. Our research is groundbreaking. Columbia would be lucky to have us. He kisses her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they break apart, his eyes are bright with determination. So how do we get out of here? Simple. You're checking out AMA against medical advice. I'm here as your fiancé to drive you home. We walk out the front door. And then we disappear for a while. Let the dust settle. Start our new lives. It's actually easier than she expected. The night staff is minimal, and everyone assumes that if Victoria Ashworth is here to pick up her fiancé, it must be legitimate. They sign a few papers, and 20 minutes later, they're walking out into the cool night air. Where to? She asks as they get into her car. Anywhere but here. Miles takes her hand as she starts the engine. Amara, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we leave, we can't undo this. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 6 months later, Amara is sitting in a coffee shop in Manhattan, editing the final draft of their research paper. Miles walks through the door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the biggest smile she's seen in weeks. We got it, he says, setting the coffee down and pulling her into his arms. Got what? The publication Victorian Studies wants our paper. Full feature article. She screams. Actually screams. Loud enough that everyone in the coffee shop turns to stare. She doesn't care. Are you serious? Dead serious. And there's more. His eyes are dancing with excitement. The editor wants to know if we're working on anything else together. Apparently, our collaborative approach to Gothic romantic literary analysis is refreshingly innovative. She kisses him right there in the middle of the coffee shop, tasting triumph and coffee and the promise of everything they've built together. I have news too, she says when they break apart. Columbia officially accepted my transfer application. Full scholarship plus a teaching assistantship. And the research position with Professor Chen? She's thrilled to have me. Apparently, our work here has gotten some attention in academic circles. Miles sits down across from her, and she can see the contentment in his face. The stress lines that were there 6 months ago have faded. He looks like himself again, the passionate, brilliant man she fell in love with. Any word from Connecticut? She asks carefully. His expression clouds slightly. Victoria got married last month, to a banker from Greenwich. Very appropriate match, according to the social pages. And your parents? Still not speaking to me. But my sister called yesterday. She said they're starting to soften, especially now that the scandal has died down and Victoria is happily married to someone else. Do you miss them? I miss the relationship I thought we had, but I don't miss feeling like I was living someone else's life. He reaches across the table and takes her hand. Besides, I have a new family now. Do you? Well, I have you, and your roommate Jessica, who still can't believe her fake ID worked so well. And Professor Chen, who's already treating us like her academic children, and that elderly librarian at Columbia who keeps bringing us cookies when we're working late. She laughs. Mrs. Rodriguez does seem to have adopted us. The point is, Amara, you don't have to be related to someone by blood to be family. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. They sit in comfortable silence for a while, working on their respective laptops, occasionally reading interesting passages aloud to each other. This has become their routine: coffee shops and libraries, late-night research sessions, the quiet intimacy of shared intellectual passion. Miles? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't accidentally sent you that diary entry? He looks up from his laptop, considering the question seriously. Honestly, I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not as dramatically, but the connection we have, the way our minds work together, the way we understand each other, that's not the kind of thing you can hide forever. Even with Victoria and the family pressure and all the obstacles, even with all of that. He closes his laptop and gives her his full attention. Amara, what we have is rare. It's the kind of connection people search for their whole lives. I was just lucky enough to find it in the 3rd row, center seat, of my Victorian literature classroom. Lucky enough or smart enough to recognize it when you saw it? Both, I hope. She saves her work and closes her laptop too. Want to get out of here? Take a walk? Actually, there's somewhere I want to take you. Where? It's a surprise. 20 minutes later, they're standing in Central Park near the Bow Bridge, the same bridge where countless movie couples have had their romantic moments. The sun is setting, painting everything in golden light, and there's something in Miles's expression that makes her heart race. "This is beautiful," she says, "but why did you want to bring me here?" "Because this is where I want to remember this moment." He turns to face her fully, and she sees something in his eyes that takes her breath away. "Amira, 6 months ago, we took a leap of faith together. We risked everything for a chance at something real. Best decision I ever made. Mine too." He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. "Which is why I want to take another leap of faith with you." Her heart stops. "Miles, I know it's crazy. I know we're still figuring out our careers and our lives and everything else. But Amira, I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life having adventures with you. Academic adventures, personal adventures, all of it." He drops to one knee right there on the bridge, and she's pretty sure her heart actually stops beating. "Amira Daniels, brilliant researcher, brave rebel, the woman who broke me out of a psychiatric facility with a forged ID. Will you marry me?" She looks down at him. This man who gave up everything for love, who chose an uncertain future with her over a secure future without her, who sees her as his intellectual equal and his romantic partner and his best friend all rolled into one. "Yes," she whispers. Then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." He slips the ring onto her finger, a simple solitaire, elegant and classic, perfectly them. Then he stands up and kisses her while tourists applaud and the sun sets over Manhattan. When they break apart, she's crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," she tells him. "I love your brilliant mind and your passionate heart and your ridiculous devotion to Victorian literature. I love that you're brave enough to fight for what you want and stubborn enough to never give up on it." "I love you too," he says, spinning her around until she's dizzy. "I love that you see possibilities where other people see obstacles. I love that you're fearless and brilliant and completely, wonderfully unpredictable." "What happens now?" she asks when he sets her down. "Now we build the life we want together. We publish our research. We teach students who are just as passionate about literature as we are. We travel to libraries and conferences around the world. We fill our apartment with too many books and stay up too late discussing Bronte and Dickens and whatever brilliant new theory you come up with next." "Sounds perfect." "It will be imperfect," he says, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll argue about interpretations of texts. We'll stress about tenure applications and publication deadlines. We'll probably drive each other crazy sometimes. I'm counting on it." As they walk back through the park, hand in hand, she thinks about how different her life is from what she'd planned 6 months ago. She thought she wanted security, approval, a clear path laid out in front of her. Instead, she chose uncertainty, risk, and love. It was the best choice she ever made. 3 years later, "Professor Daniels Harrington, could you explain the significance of the madwoman in the attic motif one more time?" Amira looks up at the eager faces of their Victorian literature students. They're students, since she and Miles co-teach this course at Columbia. It's become one of the most popular classes in the English department, partly because their collaborative teaching style brings the material to life in ways that traditional lectures never could. "Well," she says, moving to the center of the classroom, "what do you think, Professor Harrington? Should we tell them about the connection between Bertha Mason and contemporary feminist theory?" Miles grins at her from behind the podium. "I think they can handle it, Professor Daniels Harrington. After all, they did just finish reading our paper on Gothic elements in Victorian romance. Their paper, the one that started it all, the research they were doing when everything changed. It's been cited in dozens of other academic works now, and they're working on turning it into a full-length book." "The madwoman in the attic," she begins, settling into the rhythm they've perfected over 3 years of marriage and academic partnership, "represents everything Victorian society feared about female independence and sexuality." As she explains the concept, she catches Miles's eye across the room. He's watching her with the same look of intellectual appreciation and personal adoration that he had that first day in his office when everything changed. Some things never change, no matter how much time passes. After class, they walk across campus together, discussing lesson plans and grading and the conference presentation they're giving next month in London. They're that couple now, the one that other faculty members either admire or find slightly nauseating, depending on their perspective. The professors who finish each other's sentences and steal glances at each other during department meetings. "Oh," Miles says as they reach their shared office, Your diary came in the mail today. She laughs. For their first anniversary, Miles had a custom leather journal made with "The Diary That Changed Everything" embossed on the cover. She's been writing in it ever since, documenting their adventures together. Any interesting entries lately? He asks, settling into his chair across from hers. Just the usual: complaints about your terrible coffee-making skills, observations about how you steal all the blankets, deep thoughts about the symbolic significance of our love story in the context of Victorian romantic ideals. Ah, so the important stuff. The most important stuff. She pulls out the diary and flips to today's entry, one she started this morning but hasn't finished. March 15th. 3 years later, today marks exactly 3 years since the day I accidentally sent Miles my diary entry instead of my essay. 3 years since the moment that changed both of our lives forever. I've been thinking about that scared 22-year-old who sat in the library at midnight, convinced she was pathetic for being in love with her professor. If I could go back and tell her what was coming, the fear, the uncertainty, the family drama, the psychiatric facility rescue mission. Yes, that really happened. The cross-country move, the career changes, all of it. Would she still hit send on that email? I think she would, because she'd also know that all of that chaos and uncertainty led to this: a life built on honesty, passion, and genuine partnership. A marriage between equals who challenge each other intellectually and support each other unconditionally. A career that feels authentic instead of predetermined. Sometimes the best mistakes are the ones that force you to be brave. Miles is reading over my shoulder as I write this. Some habits never change. And he wants me to add that he's grateful for my terrible late-night decision-making skills. I'm grateful for his willingness to risk everything for love. We're expecting our first baby in 6 months. A little girl, due in September, right before the fall semester starts. We're planning to name her Charlotte, after Charlotte Bronte, the woman who taught us both that love is worth fighting for. No matter how many obstacles stand in your way, I can't wait to tell her the story of how her parents met. How sometimes the most important messages are the ones you never meant to send. She closes the diary and looks up at Miles, who is indeed reading over her shoulder. Charlotte, huh? He says. I like it. I thought you might. She leans back in her chair and places a hand on her growing belly. Even if what they want seems impossible? Especially then. Outside their office window, she can see Columbia students hurrying across the quad, probably rushing to submit assignments and attend lectures and live their complicated, messy, beautiful lives. Somewhere among them is probably another student with an impossible crush, another professor struggling with ethical boundaries, another person standing at a crossroads wondering which path to take. She hopes they choose bravely. She hopes they choose love. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.